to 20. It took all day to clear debris from a Virginia highway. A 69-vehicle pileup injured more than 50 people near Williamsburg Sunday. Authorities have a warning for holiday travelers.
We do know that fog and icy road conditions were causative factors in this multi-vehicle crash.
Virginia State Police Sergeant Michelle Anaya. 2019 will not bring a white Christmas for most of us.
We're likely to see several inches of rain over most of Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida. And there's the potential for some pockets of some heavier rain that may lead to some flooding issues in some areas. The area that we're most concerned about for flooding would be along the coastline of Georgia and South Carolina.
National Weather Service meteorologist Alex Lamers. The White House is preparing for a fair Senate impeachment trial. Fox's Gernal Scott with that story.
Mark Short is Chief of Staff for Vice President Mike Pence, who is also President of the Senate. Short said on NBC's Meet the Press that when it comes to the rules for a Senate trial,
we understand that Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer will strike a deal on this.
But whatever that deal may be, Short says a lengthy proceeding is not desirable.
To the extent that there's a prolonged trial, we're not anxious for that. We're anxious to say, let's get back to working for things the American people said they wanted.
The length of a trial could be determined by witnesses. Democrats want them called, while Senate Majority Leader McConnell says the trial can be fair without them. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
America is listening to Fox News.
Did you know that home loan rates have plunged again? Would you like to take advantage of these lower rates to help lower your monthly payments? Refinancing doesn't have to be for another 30 years. It can be for 10, 15, or 20 years. It's up to you. Reduce your monthly payments. Pay off your loan earlier. At Bank Pacific, where we're open to closing your loan in a hurry.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, replace roots.
Equal housing lender. Credit conditions apply.
I'm a working mom and could really use more hours in my day. Thankfully, my non-electric Kinetico water treatment system has simplified my life. It's easier to clean my home with Kinetico conditioned water. No more scrubbing tubs or wiping water spots. Cleaners work better and last longer. And all the Kinetico drinking water we want is right here. No more lugging home bottled water. All this, and I'm saving money too, thanks to Kinetico.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
A 37-year-old man has been arrested in connection to a Chicago house party shooting. Fox's Steve Rappaport reports.
Police Bureau of Patrol Chief Fred Waller says the shooting started inside the house shortly after midnight and continued as people spilled into the street.
13 victims, ranging in the age from 16 to about 48 years old.
Waller noting the party that ended in tragedy was a gathering to remember a different tragedy.
And this party was given in the memorial of a subject that was slain in April.
Homicides in the Windy City are down for the third straight year, but the Chicago Tribune reports nearly 2,600 people have been shot this year. Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
Eye drops lead to a murder charge against a man in North Carolina. Fox's Marcus White explains.
Stacey Hunsucker's 2018 death was ruled a heart attack. Joshua Hunsucker, her husband and a paramedic, collected $250,000 in insurance money following her death. He's now charged with her murder. A prosecutor said a blood test detected high levels of a substance found in eye drops, which can cause the heart to stop. Local media reports Stacey Hunsucker had heart problems before. Joshua Hunsucker was ordered held on a $1.5 million bond. Marcus White, Fox News.
A would-be puppy thief in Canada ends up howling in pain. Fox's Tom Rigatti reports.
It began when the unnamed suspect answered an online ad selling a 9-week-old American bulldog named Tarzan in Brampton, not far from Toronto. Police say when the owner handed the puppy to him, the suspect refused to pay and then pointed a gun. But he didn't get too far. When trying to get away, the suspect shot himself in the leg and crumpled to the ground. The seller called police and actually rendered aid to the suspect before cops and an ambulance arrived. His injuries are described as non-life-threatening. Tarzan has been returned to his owner unharmed. Tom Rigatti, Fox News.
And free agent pitcher Hyun-Jin Ryu has agreed to play for the Toronto Blue Jays on an $80 million 4-year contract.
Half a day, Tritons. This is Chelsea St. Nicholas, president of the UOG Alumni Association. I made some of the best memories during my time as a Triton. Because of this, I have committed to giving back to the G is for Giving campaign, which will help student scholarships, programs, and activities. And I encourage you all to do the same. To make a tax-deductible donation, log on to give.uog.edu by December 31st or call 735-2957.
Viva UOG!
Cocoa Coffee Company is now available at Circle K. Single origin coffee beans carefully sourced and locally roasted to give you the freshest cup of coffee Guam has to offer. Grab a cup that's brewed every 30 minutes or purchase a bag of the locally roasted whole beans. Flavors now serving: light medium roasted Ethiopia and medium dark roasted Jamaican Blue Mountain. Exclusively available at Circle K. With every Cocoa Coffee Company purchase, a portion of the proceeds will go towards the Cocoa Recovery Program.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, a right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. Isn't that what you always say, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Maybe I'll let you say it tomorrow, just to keep you in practice, okay? A little louder, please.
Okay.
The folks out there in our international radio listening audience can't hear you nodding your head.
Yes, sir.
There we go. That's better. Okay, so the Second Amendment is how we start the program every day. And I think everybody out there in our international radio listening audience understands that Tall Tales is devoted to the United States Constitution, the constitutional rights which it provides, the restrictions on statism that it provides, all of which, unfortunately, has been eroded by the left. And it's the position, or it's the province of Tall Tales to secure and enhance and protect the freedoms provided by that document to the extent that my extremely loud and far-reaching voice can do that. And, you know, we talk about our international radio listening audience. We get somebody on Facebook today from Chartres in Paris, Pierre. So, you know, we've got somebody listening in France. So for all of those folks listening to us in France, je m'appelle Robert. Comment vous appelez-vous? Pretty much the extent of my French vocabulary, but it's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. Right, Real Joe Cruz?
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go from there to the Daily News. I'm sorry. The Demi Ekadni. I was looking at the Daily News as I spoke, wondering who from the USA Today network would write their local editorial today. Today it's Catherine Jean Lopez, a columnist, and she can be contacted at pez@nationalreview.com. So I don't know much about Catherine Jean Lopez. I suspect she's a lefty, however, since she appears on the editorial page of a Gannett publication. And I'll just read the first paragraph, and maybe that's enough. It was the week before Christmas, and I found myself anxious and angry. Well, she is on the left, isn't she? So of course she's angry. That's enough for that. So from there, we go to the Guam Daily Post, who occasionally will toss us a softball, but usually has some hard-hitting, edgy, readable editorials. This is a good one. The headline is "Hoping and Praying Instead of Legislating Government Accountability." In near tears, Speaker Tina Munya Barnes addressed her fellow senators and the people of Guam, saying she is grateful this, quote, exercise in reason and rationale. Now, there's a sentence for you. Exercise in reason and rationale had prevailed, but she was in near tears when she said this. Now, of course, we know in the 21st century, Real Joe Cruz, if we have make a choice between emotion and reason, what is the politically correct choice?
Reason?
Try again.
Emotion.
Of course. Yeah. It's feelings are what really count here in the woke 21st century that the left has shoved at us. But in near tears, Tina Munya Barnes addressed her fellow senators and the people of Guam, saying she is grateful that this, quote, exercise in reason and rationale prevailed. I'd like to take the time to explain what the word rationale means, but I'm not going to. Another quote, "We have been on a hard-fought journey to finally do right by our Sinas, our World War II survivors. This road has not been an easy journey," Tina said. Very good, Tina. And you won, because this was captured and put in print, and I suppose everyone out in video land was able to catch the emotional tone of your voice as you pandered, as you spoke up for our Manamku. The journey hasn't ended, however, for those waiting for their war reparations. In fact, the answers that a few brave senators had dared ask that directly affect the survivors haven't been answered. On Friday afternoon, after senators had cast their votes 12-3 to pass Bill 181 and use an untold amount of money to pay an unknown number of people war reparations, some senators rose to explain their vote and express their concern with what happens now. Here's another quote that'll just tug at your heartstrings. My mother, Lourdes Camacho, Guam's First Lady. Now, I didn't stutter there. Lourdes Camacho, Guam's First Lady. So Mary Camacho's mother was a First Lady of Guam, and she was the First Lady. I guess the wives of the naval governors didn't count. First Lady, she's 91 years now, and I will have to explain to her whether she will get her war claims check from our local government, or if she does, when or how she's going to go about that. I don't have those answers, said Senator Mary Camacho Torres. Torres, like most of the others who have heard the stories of our World War II survivors, believe that they should receive war reparations for what they've been through. But she questioned the rationale behind the bill. Maybe she should have talked to Tina, who says that the senators exercise were in an exercise of reason and rationale. So if Mary wanted to know the rationale, Tina seems to be the Westpac distributor for rationale behind the bill. The reason for rushing it through without due process and its impact on the federal effort in H.R. 1365 to pay war claims using funds taken from Section 30. She was only one of 3 senators to vote no on Bill 181. These will be known as the principled ones. I'll get to that later. There are many issues with this bill, beginning with the lifting of the local fund cap and so many questions about how this claim against the federal government is to be administered locally. What happened to the funds, for example, that are already held by the federal government? Why are some of us not entitled to get the information? I'm not sure no one would ever want to go regress to the old politics of shutting out voices, of overpowering the underrepresented and strong-arming just because they can. I know that's not what we want to do, and I pray that this is not the precedent that we set. Okay, now that's still Mary Camacho Torres. I pray that that was not the precedent that we set. We wish some of those who spoke after the vote had been more vocal after a new version of Bill 181 was introduced on session floor on Wednesday. There was no opportunity for senators to ask questions, to confirm that there was real money available to pay war survivors, or to define the mechanics by which the payments would be made. According to Senator Therese Terlahi, quote, in delaying debate on Bill 181, the legislature has really taken a departure from its own rules, which have embedded in it extra precautions, extra transparency when it comes to bills that impact the finances of the government of Guam. Even Sabina Paris, in her remarks, stated, I would be remiss if I didn't feel that we had lost the opportunity to create a better bill. And I think that's probably the theory that underlies the idea that a bill should go through a 3-reading process before it's passed. Let's see what other folks think about it. You know, you got 15 people down there. Out of the 15, one of them might have a better idea of how to go about something than the person who sponsored the bill. Terlahi was also concerned with what she called the bill's arbitrary cutoff date, where it cuts off certain people from being paid their claims. She also noted that the memorandum of understanding has not yet been seen. I think the reason for that is because there ain't none. This elusive MOU is central to the execution of Bill 181 if it becomes law and has been under discussion for the better part of the year. I do not condone what feels like empty promises that have been drawn out for months, and that we stand here without the ability to look at an MOU that has supposedly been drafted. Now, this is Terlahi again. Now, I hadn't read that arguably that bill memorandum has been drafted. Well, I'd sure like to see it. I have a feeling that it could probably use some help if it's like everything else that comes out of that outfit. Or will be drafted. That's more like it. Or is promised to be drafted. We still not have been able to see that, Terlahi said. Terlahi in Paris and one of the bill's most vocal critics, Senator Tello Taitigui, voted to pass the bill, all saying they did so in hopes that the war survivors would receive their war claims sooner than later. These are not the brave ones. You know, I think this is a travesty. I don't think this bill is a good bill. I don't think that we should pass a bill without discussing it. But I don't want anybody saying that I'm against the Manamku. So even if it's the worst bill that ever came down the pike, so long as the words war claims are in there somewhere, by gosh, I'm going to vote for it. You can count on me. Paris summed up the issue succinctly. Had we had more opportunities for discussion, we might have had more opportunity to make changes to the bill to create more accountability, to strike the balance in providing our Manamku the reparations they urgently need and deserve without potentially sacrificing governmental needs of all our people. Now, I still am not sure that I know who our people is. If it's Lulian Guerrero who's talking, I know exactly who our people is, and it ain't me. You know, it's like she told Ray Tenorio during the campaign, I was born here, Ray. But why rush to pass the bill without appropriate discussion? Terlahi said survivors had been drawn into the middle of a political battle. I don't want to name names. Now, why would you not want to name names? I don't want to name names. But it's definitely obvious there seems to be a political battle between the congressman's office, the governor's office, and right here in the legislature. Well, let me name some names. The congressman's office, that would probably be Mike San Nicolas. The governor's office, that would probably be Lou Leon Guerrero. Senator Terlahi, you ought to name the names of the people in the legislature. What is this? I didn't want to say anybody's name because I didn't want to embarrass them. This is the silliest line I think I've seen in a long time. I don't want to name names, but these people did bad things. That's very good. Today we are left with a bill that basically gives the administration a blank check with no guidelines how to disperse it. Instead, we lift it up with a wing and a prayer that it works for our Manamku without causing harm to the entire community. A prayer. Okay, now here's more Terlahi. I pray that when and if the government of Guam implements the disbursement of payments of war claims from current government of Guam funds ahead of the congressional payments of Section 30 funds that they have set aside, and that the government will do it fairly, that they will do it without error, so that our claimants, those that survived the war, those who suffered, that they will feel justice that has eluded them for 75 years. Terlahi prayed. So maybe what we need to do then, instead of, when we're going to pass a bill, instead of calling the legislature in session and go through this rigmarole of discussion, which obviously Tina doesn't like, maybe we could just set aside a room for prayer. So those senators who don't want to name names and don't want to take a really gutsy approach to standing up to something that's very wrong could adjourn to the prayer room with Senator Terlahi and pray. Senator Paris similarly noted, in voting yes for the bill, we trust that our Magahaga will carry out her fiduciary responsibility to create an equitable relationship with the federal government, so we are given the opportunity for the amount that is due in its entirety. Well, you trust the Magahaga? Well, then we will have another alternative. Whatever we want to do, we'll write a letter to the governor saying, Governor, you have the authority to accomplish 1, 2, and 3, and we trust you to do it correctly. So there's no need to go through this speeches and debate and voting and all that stuff. So we could either trust or pray over at the legislative branch. Paris said, I hope in passing this bill, the lives of our Manamku are made better without jeopardizing or compromising the people of Guam. Hope, pray, trust. Senators, we share that hope with you, says the Post. I don't. I don't want to depend on prayers. I don't want to depend on hope. I darn sure don't want to depend on trust. If that's what we're going to do, we don't need 15 people to do it. We could just get one guy. We could get a real Joe Cruz to go down there and do it before the show starts. Pray, trust. You could do that, couldn't you, real Joe Cruz?
I could,
but
I'm not going to name any names, sir.
Well, of course not. You can't. You certainly wouldn't want to name my name, that's for sure. Don't name any names. Yeah, real Joe Cruz, you could do that with half your brain tied behind your back, just to make it fair.
Thank you for the confidence, sir.
Yeah, well, when you set the standard so low. All right, I'm going to give the Post a star here. You really called them out. on this one. Hope. Hope. Pray. Trust. There it is. All right, so from there we go to the card. And let's see what we have on the card today. Yeah. Okay, well, we got to start out with the 12 Days of Christmas, of course. And let's see, I've got Brown versus Rory. I've got Underwood versus San Nicolas. I've got Awa versus Gajaneros. And I've got Tello versus Tello. And Weir versus American Samoa. And some stuff that's been on the card for quite a while. And before I get to the card, I have another Joe on the line. Okay, this is not you. This is another Joe. So,
yes, sir.
The tale of the two Joes.
The Joe lines are open.
The Joe line is open. Good afternoon, Joe.
Uncle Bob, I'm relying. you might be included legislation in your spouse of an uncle, right?
I'm good. War survivor, look, sa ngayon na Guahanay Salapena.
Yeah, right. So you're going to get your cut.
Well,
even Dave Davis, right?
No, I don't think. Dave Davis is not going to get a cut. If he may sue because he's not going to get a cut, but he doesn't get a cut. But I do.
No, you have to be as a spouse of someone who survived the occupation.
Yeah, my wife did, and I'm a war survivor too, Joe. I was born in 1938, so I lived through the whole thing.
Yeah.
The only difference is I did my surviving on the mainland instead of here.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Well, the thing is, I'm just trying to, to be fair.
Trying to be fair.
I want to use the words that they're using.
Oh, okay.
And trust
Yeah.
that they're going to be fair. I pray, I hope, and I trust they're going to be fair, and they're going to include all the spouses, including Young Kebab and Dave Davis. But having said that, it kind of reminds me of the Obama campaign. The words that they were picking up on that people really love to hear is hope, trust, and I think there's maybe a word I'm missing. I'm not sure. But definitely hope.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and praying. Get me. I pray. Certainly,
I think you have to give it to they're definitely politicians, and they know just what to say to the Manamco, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Manamco have a lot of influence on in their family. So in fact, what we're witnessing here is just a bunch of politicians being politicians.
Yeah, and I especially want to hand it to Tina because, as the beginning of the editorial says, in near tears, Tina was almost crying when she said she's grateful for this exercise in reason and rationale. So I don't know if she was crying because she doesn't know what the word rationale means. No, I couldn't have bet that. I think the near tears was for the benefit of the Manamco. So the Manamco who are watching on TV would be able to sit back and say, "Oy, Tina."
Well, maybe she's trying to make them happy because I think she might have pissed off some of them with the recreational marijuana.
Uh-huh.
You're taking the authority out of the elders' hands. The elders, who they, when I was a kid, there was this. My grandmother was taking me places. Said, "Where are we going?" So we're going to go to the Surohana. So why? Because we're going to give you business. And I didn't have a choice there, kebab.
Mm-hmm.
And they're making me take stuff that didn't taste good. But it's a Manamco chain of command, so to speak. It's in their authority and it's their connections.
If your Bia says take the samut, you take the amut, right?
That's right. If your nana says it's good for you and you better take it or else, because you don't want to make her unhappy. But so Tina Munya Barnes, she took that authority away from the one uncle because now you can have it recreationally. It doesn't have to be amulet.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So maybe she's trying to make some brownie points because she pissed some of them off. I don't know.
Did you
they're
say
not going to say it.
Did you say brownie points?
Or is it? I get. Yeah, is it recreational? Is it the medicinal brownie? But anyway, Kabal, thanks for your time. But but you really, it's good that you're bringing this up, and they should definitely address it. Okay, Kabal, thanks.
Thanks again. Another Joe. So you opened the Joe line right at the beginning of the program today, huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so from there we go to the 12 Days of Christmas. I think we'll go to the break before we go to the 12 Days of Christmas.
In life, we all have the ability to make a difference, to make an impact on someone's life. As we look around us, time never stops, but we are filled with endless moments of gratitude. The art of giving is incorporated in so many different ways. At Guam Gift Baskets, we want to be able to express your gratitude and love to those who you care about. Show your appreciation with a gift made with love this holiday season. Visit our website at guamgiftbaskets.com. See the smiles, touch their hearts, feel the experience.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with a true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine. A bistro look that feels like home. Their menu features local and traditional flavors with a twist. From their famous Kelaguen Hapa to fresh ahi poke salad and their award-winning barbecue ribs. Mezcla takes your favorite local dishes and serves them with extra flair that you'll only find at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Stop by their newest location in the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. For reservations, call 969-2652. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by American Water Tech. From now through December 31st, you can save almost $900 on a complete Kinetico non-electric reverse osmosis drinking water system for your home. Call American Water Tech at 649-2301 to find out more. American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
So 12 Days of Christmas, we've been through the first day of Christmas, partridge in a pear tree, the second day of Christmas, 2 turtle doves, and then on the third day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 3 French hens. I hope you're listening there, Pierre. 3 French hens. Yeah, and this is what I got on that. Now we break the eggs. If these are good laying hens, you will walk right into the morass that is the current California versus Missouri interstate egg import-export law fight. And I looked it up, and this is what I got. Missouri versus California, chickens and progressive state sovereignty before the Supreme Court. Missouri versus California could provide important insights into the future of the Supreme Court and state power. Missouri and 13 other states are challenging California regulations that apply to the sale of eggs in California. Now here it goes. Remember, this is California. In California, just because you got a chicken and the chicken lays eggs doesn't mean you can go out and sell those eggs. Essentially, in California, each egg sold in California must come from a hen that was raised in a manner that allowed the hen to lie down, stand up, fully extend its limbs, and turn around freely. It's too bad we can't play that song from ABBA, Dancing Queen, when I was reading that, right, Rojo Cruz? Yeah, this is California. You just can't have a chicken coop. That chicken has to be able to lie down, stand up, fully extend its limbs, and turn around freely. If it doesn't, you cannot sell the eggs. Now, I don't know if chickens that get that kind of exercise lay healthier eggs. Okay, so the author of what I'm reading says, I wrote an article a couple years back on earlier iteration of this litigation. As I detailed in the article, I think California's landmark global warming legislation raises analogous issues. So an adverse ruling here could dim that legislation as well. If the court reaches the merits, this case could decide whether states like California are able to fill the gaps when an increasingly dysfunctional Congress fails to legislate an important issue. So what the issue is here is this. Missouri is saying, we know how to raise chickens in Missouri. Yeah, back there in the show me state, they know how to raise their own chickens. And we want to export eggs, and California is interfering with our ability to export these eggs in interstate commerce because they're putting these ridiculous laws on the books as to how we in Missouri raise our eggs. And we take the position that an egg is an egg is an egg, and you wouldn't be able to tell from looking at the egg how it's, can I use the word mother?
I think so.
All right, how the hen that laid the egg, what it was like. So this is once again, this is dealing with chickens, and I'm sure that if you remember the current events on Guam, you see the connection here. The do-gooders, the lefties, those who would jump in and tell you how you must execute every part of your life and what you do, would know better about raising chickens than these hillbillies up there in Missouri. So if you're not going to raise you're not going to raise chickens the way we want, we won't let your eggs into the state. We're going to have a border crossing there, and every egg that comes into California will be inspected, and the importer is going to have to determine that chickens that laid the eggs were proper. So it's really kind of cut from the same cloth as our cockfighting ban. Cruelty to animals, you know, and in the name of fighting cruelty to animals, we can really gain power over what people are allowed to do. Now, I always take the position, in fact, on the cockfighting controversy on our island. I'm not crazy about cockfighting. And I probably succumb to most, if not all, of the anti-cockfighting arguments. But I also believe that when it comes to criminal law, that's a state function. That's not a function of the national government. In the United States, as far as cockfighting is concerned, all 50 states decided to outlaw cockfighting. If that's what they want to do, that's fine. That's federalism. So I suspect the do-gooders were saying, well, you can't do it anywhere in the states, but those territories, they're still doing it out there. But we don't have to get their legislatures to ban cockfighting. We just go to Congress because they're territories. And at the nation's capital can make local law for them. And we should do this wherever we have the chance because we're lefties and we know better for people than they do for themselves. So that's the mysterious Missouri versus California dimension to the third day of Christmas. Then we talked about the fourth day of Christmas. That was 4 blackbirds. The fifth day of Christmas, which I tried to explain, but I think I even confused myself in attempting to explain the fifth day of Christmas. On the fifth day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 5 golden rings. And I attempted to get into some of the legal aspects there because the text of what I got this from says, not exactly a girl's best friend, but they'll do. Just one issue might crop up here. Is who gets to keep these little baubles if the true love isn't quite as true as originally planned? In other words, and I started out just on the wrong foot on this, if the man gave the ring to the woman that he wanted to marry, and she took the ring, and then later on decided she didn't want to marry him. After I said it, boy, I realized, oh, man. Bob, go over to the toilet here at the Point and grab a bar of Lifebuoy soap and wash your mouth out with soap. after all of those horrible things you said. So after I cleaned up my mouth, I came back and I said, what could happen here is this. If they decide that they want to marry them and they give them a ring and they change their mind, do they get to keep the ring, or do they have to give it back to them since they aren't going to get married? Is that clear, Real Joe Cruz?
It's crystal clear, sir.
Yeah. It's the wonders of the 21st century, how we could take something that was so, just so politically wrong, talking about him and her getting married. So anyhow, I cleaned that one up. And then next day we went on to, on the 7th day of Christmas, it was the 7 swans of swimming. And the 8th day of Christmas was a problem because it's 8 maids a milking. And, of course, we had to decide, what kind of animal do you milk? What would a maid milk, Real Joe Cruz?
Goats.
Goats, cows. Does it have to be a female goat or cow in order to be milked?
I think so.
That just doesn't seem right, does it? Do the goats and cows know this?
I don't think so, sir.
Yeah, it's very, very politically incorrect. And if a maid can milk, why can't a... Yeah, this gets really tough here. Why can't it be 8 theys a milking instead of 8 maids a milking? And then we come to the 9th day of Christmas. On the 9th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 9 drummers drumming. Check your local noise ordinances for restrictions on massive amounts of drumming. Let's cite New York City's local law 113, which as of 2005 placed some real restrictions on commercial music. So 9 drums of drumming may not be all that good either. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to come back to 10 pipers piping. So much for 12 days of Christmas. And then from there, we go to former port manager, settlement, nothing more than political payoff. And this is listed on the card as Brown versus Rory. And the Brown is the former executive manager of the commercial port, a certain Joanne Brown. And of course, we all know who Rory is. I'm going to get into Brown versus Rory in a second, but I notice our Carl is on the line. He may very well want to clarification on the 5 golden rings. Is that correct, Carl?
Hey, good afternoon, Bob.
Yeah.
Before you got too deep into the port stuff, I wanted to just backtrack to something you mentioned about animal rights, with the chickens in California needing to be able to stand up and spin around and, flap their wings. I recently saw a post, a sponsored post on Facebook, which was I don't know if it was a poll or what it is. It's one of these places where you sign up, to change something on an issue.
A petition.
Yeah, petition, exact. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it was to ban the use of mice as lab animals for tests.
They wanted to use lawyers instead?
Probably somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I think I've told that one before, but it's appropriate to tell it again. Harvard Medical School is not using mice for lab experience anymore. They're using lawyers instead, Carl. And they've got 3 reasons. First of all, the lawyers are more numerous. Second reason is that there's much less likelihood that the lab assistants will form any kind of an attraction to the lawyers. And the third reason is there are some things that even rats won't do. Yeah, but you saw a petition about not using mice for laboratory experiments, right?
Yes, and I just found it so ironic because, of course, they've protested against using rabbits and cats and dogs, but now it's gotten down to mice. And the ironic thing I find is that the experiments done on these lab animals help to save millions of lives or extend their lives.
Yeah, but it's just people. It's not animals.
Yeah, exactly.
So it doesn't count.
Yeah. I just found that very, very ironic. That, and you can kind of see the trend of where this is going to. Eventually, they're going to start proposing the idea of banning the consumption of meat, because it's not enough to just not, to be a vegan or be a vegetarian yourself. You've got to force it on everybody else on the planet. I just find it very ironic. And I'd like to ask you one question, Bob. You had an item on your card that I was trying my best to listen into, and I wanted to call in when you came to it, and then all of a sudden it disappeared off the card. And I don't know if that's because you never got to it or because you covered it and it's just history. And that was you mentioned you were going to bring up something about Antonio Gramsci.
Yeah, I haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay, so I didn't miss it.
You did not miss it. I'm going to get there. And the nice thing about Antonio Gramsci is that it doesn't perish. That if I don't get to it for a week or a month, it's still going to be relevant, because I think we are seeing an application of Antonio Gramsci's theorizing right here on our island.
Yes, yeah, and in the mainland too. Yeah, I have some interesting, some comments that I find interesting and some quotes that I think someone in your audience might find interesting when the time is right. But I'm just relieved to find out I didn't miss out on that. I felt bad when I heard you read the card one day, and I realized, wait, he didn't even bring that up. Maybe I missed out. So I'm relieved very much.
Well, the thought of having missed an episode of Tall Tales, I could see that would be enough to cause anyone a certain amount of stress. And then the determination that you actually hadn't missed it would be a cause for great relief. I can understand that.
I've sat out in parking lots waiting for a break, so I could run in and get something done, so I could come back and I would miss as little as possible. And one day I was doing yard work, doing the same thing, and when I came back in, you were discussing about the United States taking off various military family personnel from Guam prior to the invasion. And I really kicked myself because I was so interested in the topic, and I got the tail end of it, but I missed out on part of that. Anyway, the lesson I learned is don't miss out on any of Tall Tales.
It's an example of the P word, Carl, priorities.
Priorities, exactly.
Listening to Tall Tales should always be your top priority.
Yes, I was kicking myself. Anyway, Bob, thank you for allowing me to chime in, and I will keep listening for when you finally bring up the illustrious Antonio Gramsci.
Okay, Carl, thanks for calling.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah, so back to the card here. This is Joanne Brown versus Roy Respicio. And this is a long article in the Post. The headline, former port manager, settlement, nothing more than political payoff. Former Port Authority manager Joanne Brown is calling out the current management's willingness to engage in settlement with former port employees at, quote, as nothing more than a political payoff for those employees. Quote, what they're essentially going to do is bring these employees back to the port, reinfect the port with their actions, and compensate them quite substantially with ratepayers' money. That's what I see, and this to me is nothing but a political payoff, Brown said. She isn't exactly beating around the bush here. The port board on Thursday signed off on 2 resolutions. One authorized Port Legal Counsel to submit the terms of a settlement agreement to former port employee Leonora Leon Guerrero, who is engaged in an appeal at the Civil Service Commission. In addition to Leon Guerrero, the port is engaged in litigation with former employees Francis Areola and Josette Havalosa. The second resolution authorizes Port Council to explore settlement and draft agreements and authorizes the Port Deputy General Manager. Deputy General, not the General Manager, the Deputy General Manager. Okay, well, let's take a short break here, and I'll come back to Brown versus Rory.
Celebrate your holiday festivities with dinner at Hyatt Regency Guam on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day at Al Dente Ristorante. Enjoy a holiday family set menu, which includes Fiorentina steak, lobster tail, and an array of Italian favorites, suitable for up to a family of 4. Eat, drink, and be merry during the holidays at Hyatt Regency Guam's Al Dente Ristorante. To make your reservations, please call 647-1234.
If you've ever struggled for breath, you know what a scary experience it is. Whether you have asthma, emphysema, COPD, lung cancer, or another respiratory illness, the right medical treatment makes all the difference. GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic has the latest technology and respiratory equipment, staffed by world-class pulmonologists. Make an appointment today with GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic and start breathing easier. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So here we are, back again. We got about 8 more minutes to that big halftime show that we put on every day at 1700. So I'm going to talk about Brown versus Rory, at least for that long. So the second resolution that the board adopted authorizes Port Council to explore settlement and draft agreements and authorizes the Port Deputy General Manager to receive signed settlement agreements and take action appropriate to comply with the agreement. Not the general manager, the deputy general manager. The resolutions, while not explicitly offering settlement, open the door wide for that avenue, Brown said. The former employees are part of a group of individuals informally known as the Port 7, caught up in an allegedly fraudulent workers' compensation claim filed by former Port Marketing Manager Bernadette Stern-Mano around 8 years ago. Some of the Port 7 have successfully won back employment at the port, including Human Resources Manager Francine Rocio, who was reinstated on November 25, according to her personnel documents. Her papers show that she will be making $79,000 a year as the Personnel Service Administrator at the Port's Human Resources Division. She is entitled to back pay at an amount yet to be determined. The potential for settlement was never considered during Brown's time at the port, she said. I think if we entered into settlement, I think we would have sent out the wrong message. I think it would have appeared that we condone their actions. The port should have continued to challenge the employees in the court, Brown said. The most recent ruling that happened this summer essentially said that if it could be determined to be a crime, that these people could be held responsible. And had they gone back and completed the judicial process, I think the outcome could have been different, Brown added. Brown compared the situation with Guam YTK, the former fisheries company that initially won millions from the port through arbitration but ultimately lost after the port appealed at the Supreme Court of Guam. That's what you do to represent the public interest, Brown said. Brown criticized the board, current general manager Rory Respicio, and Governor Lou Leon Guerrero. Respicio is a compromised individual. When Bernadette Stern-Mano got fired, who hired her? Rory Respicio, Brown said. When Respicio was appointed Port General Manager at the start of this year, he assigned former Deputy General Manager Connie Jo Brennan Shinohara to review the terminations of 13 port employees by the former port management, including the port's 7 cases. Shinohara's resignation should signal red flags, Brown said. Now, Connie Jo Brennan Shinohara resigned about a week ago without an explanation as to why. And ironically, the ink was hardly dry on Connie Jo's resignation when Luis Baza stepped forward to be appointed, to be chosen as her replacement. There wasn't a gap of even 30 seconds between her resignation and his appointment. Just coincidence, I'm sure. But why would she resign? Or why would she be... I guess you have to speculate a little bit. Could you speculate and say that Luis Baza was rounded up before Shinohara, before Connie Jo decided to resign? And Baza is sitting there saying, "Put me in, coach, put me in." And then Connie Jo was called in and said, "Connie, would you like to spend more time with your family? Would you like to resign your position?" To which Connie Jo said, "Well, if I did, who would do my work?" And after a short drum roll, Luis Baza comes dancing into the room saying, "I could do it." A very interesting set of circumstances. Connie Jo was given the job of setting up a task force to determine whether justice was done to the Port 7 and others. And then just before the board makes a move towards settlement, Connie Jo resigns. And instantly, Luis Baza is given the job that Connie Jo resigned from. Just a series of very interesting coincidences, no doubt. And then, of course, the settlement, the mechanic for the settlement is not supposed to be the general manager. It's supposed to be Baza, the deputy general manager. And Brown points out that Rory is compromised because when Mano got fired at the port, who hired her? Senator Rory Respicio. As I remember, almost as quickly as Baza was hired to replace Connie Jo. Brown said Shinohara's resignation should signal red flags. And then she goes on to say, also, the governor, she also said the governor has told her that she didn't support settlement. The employees got on the Leon Guerrero Tenorio bandwagon, and they've gotten compensated quite well for it. The governor told me she didn't support settlement, and that's exactly what the representatives of her administration executed Thursday. So either she's not in charge or she just let this happen. But these kind of payouts don't come out of the blue, Brown said. So a very disturbing set of circumstances. And let's just talk about some general principles, neutral principles, okay? If a person works for the government of Guam and he is guilty of misfeasance, nonfeasance, or malfeasance, he can be fired. And we learned from the misconduct of a corrections officer here recently that it can be off-duty misconduct that could cause a disciplinary hammer to fall. So if a government of Guam employee is disciplined, there's an elaborate procedure. First of all, the employee must be given a statement in writing as to what he did wrong, what laws and rules he violated. And with that in hand, he has 10 days to go before the director, and he can explain his case, he can file written papers, he can bring witnesses, he can be represented by counsel, just to make sure that a mistake wasn't made. So after that, if the director has determined that even after hearing the employee's side of the story, the termination is just, he issues what's called a final notice of adverse action to the employee. And the adverse action can say it's time for the big halftime show that we have at 1700. Finish this up right after that.
Amazingly, no one was killed. Investigators are still trying to determine what caused the initial accident and the chain reaction. They say that fog and icy road conditions were factors. You're getting a break at the gas pump in time for holiday travel. Analyst Trilby Lundberg of the Lundberg Survey.
Gasoline prices are still declining. There's been a 4-cent drop in the national average to $2.61 over the past 2 weeks. And over 6 weeks, the price is down 8 cents.
San Diego has the highest average price in the nation for regular grade gas at $3.62 per gallon. The lowest average price is $2.14 in Houston. But so much for a white Christmas this year.
For most people across the country, what you see on the ground now is what you're going to get. And if it's relatively warm, if it's warmer than freezing and it starts melting off, then you may lose that snow in the next few days. But I would say people can look at the ground and see what they have now, and that might give them a good idea of their chances for a white Christmas.
National Weather Service meteorologist Alex Lamers. State media says Syria's air defenses are responding to missile attacks from Israel. Damascus residents report hearing explosions. There's been no immediate comment from Israel, but Tel Aviv has previously attacked Iran-linked targets. America is listening to Fox News.
Did you know that home loan rates have plunged again? Would you like to take advantage of these lower rates to help lower your monthly payments? Refinancing doesn't have to be for another 30 years. It can be for 10, 15, or 20 years. It's up to you. Reduce your monthly payments. Pay off your loan earlier. At Bank Pacific, where we're open to closing your loan in a hurry.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, replace roots.
Equal housing lender. Credit conditions apply.
Water. It covers nearly 3/4 of our Earth. From vast oceans to millions of rivers and streams, we're all concerned with protecting our world's water. But none is more important than the water you and your family drink and use throughout your home. A Connecticut water treatment system can improve your water so that your family is using the best water in the world. Connecticut, for refreshing ideas on water.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
A solemn event on the first night of Hanukkah in New Jersey. Fox's Tom Rigotti reports.
A special Festival of Light ceremony taking place at the kosher market at the center of the Jersey City shootout this month. 15-year police veteran Joe Seals was killed, along with 3 bystanders and the 2 gunmen who've been linked to a virulent anti-Semitic group. Seals, along with injured officers Raymond Sanchez and Mariela Fernandez, were honored at the menorah lighting. Cantor Yoli Greenfield, brother of shooting victim Mindy Ferenz, chanted the blessings and sang traditional Hanukkah songs. Many members of the city's Hasidic community were in attendance. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
No word yet on when or if House Speaker Nancy Pelosi will send the articles of impeachment to the Senate. Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell on Fox News Sunday.
Did you really think the United States Senate was going to start this trial before January 6th? You have no idea what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks as the leaders are trying to negotiate what's going to happen. And as I remind you, Republican impeachment with President Bill Clinton, the managers weren't appointed until January 6th. I hope that the leaders are going to continue to talk.
Republican Senator Roy Blunt on CBS's Face the Nation says it's not proper for her to stall.
I actually don't think the Speaker, who has great power in a lot of cases, has the power to decide not to send over the determined will of the House of Representatives. They have voted. They have voted on 2 articles. They need to come and defend those 2 articles.
More than 100 conservative evangelicals are protesting an editorial in a prominent Christian magazine which calls for the removal of President Trump. The signatories say the Christianity Today article is a criticism of their character as well. The investigation is on at a Las Vegas apartment building after 6 people died and 13 people were injured. 50 people lost their homes. Some residents say there was no heat in the building. They were using their stoves to keep warm. I'm Jessica Stone, Fox News.
Hey, what's that?
A Subway Big Hot Pastrami.
My Big Hot Pastrami?
No,
My Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Get your own.
Get your own Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Tender, juicy beef on freshly baked sunflower crunch bread, topped with pickles and mustard. Finish off your meal with all new seasoned potato wedges, baked to perfection right in the restaurant. Both available for limited time only. Subway, make it what you want.
Are you ready for some football? The Ray Gibson Show has got your fix every day with the Points NFL Pick'em contest. Get the latest updates as we check out the past week's performance and break down the upcoming action. Get your game on by calling the hotline at 888-TALK or sound off on Facebook Live at thepoint.gu. League members get a chance to win some awesome weekly prizes with a shot for your choice of a new GTA phone. The NFL Pick'em contest is brought to you by Current Guam with special thanks to GTA.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So back to Brown versus Rory, a story that talks about Brown accusing Rory, accusing the board and Rory of engaging in political payoffs by settling cases for the Port 7. And just before the break, I was explaining how the disciplinary process in the government of Guam works. If an employee has, in the eyes of his director, been guilty of misfeasance, nonfeasance, or malfeasance, a statement of written charges must be given to the employee. He has 10 days to defend before the director. If the director still decides that he's going to fire after having heard the employee's side of the story, he serves a final notice of adverse action on the employee, and then the employee may take an appeal to the Civil Service Commission. Seven people who have a fairly well-developed set of rules. It's a tribunal, and management must prove its case by clear and convincing evidence that the employee did what he was accused of, and that the punishment that was meted out by management was reasonable for that offense. And up to this point, the road is full of traps for the unwary manager. Up until last year, the matter had to have been concluded in 60 days. That is, that management had 60 days, the director had 60 days from the day that he knew of the misconduct to serve that notice of final adverse action. Not only knew, but knew or should have known. And the should have known, there's a lot of room for imaginative commissioners on the Civil Service Commission. By the way, you've heard me rant and rave about people talking about the director of the Department of Administration when that isn't the title. The title is the Director of Administration, the Director of Labor, and so on. Well, they do the same thing at the Civil Service Commission. And you'll hear people that even work there talk in terms of the Civil Service Commission board. There's no board at the Civil Service Commission. There is a commission. And every member of that commission is a commissioner. He's not a board member. But commissioners have in the past been quite imaginative in determining when a director should have known about the misconduct of an employee. And that's when the clock starts to run. And if the clock runs past 60 days, too bad. Now, the 60 days was lengthened to 90 at the beginning of this year. Still puts management in a bind. My analysis is that what has to happen, because the time limit is so short, even with 90 days, either the director is forced into making a decision before they should. In other words, making a lower quality decision than he would make if he had more time to deal with it. So, or that too much resources have to be developed to the entire process of investigation and preparing the notice of adverse action. And this is especially true in the law enforcement agencies, which is where most of the misconduct arises. Cops, fire, corrections. So when the case gets to the Civil Service Commission, management has to prove by clear and convincing evidence, which is the second highest standard of proof. The highest is beyond a reasonable doubt. Clear and convincing evidence that the employee did what management accused him of and that the punishment fits the offense. Occasionally, sometimes the Civil Service Commission will say, well, yes, management proved its case, but a termination is too hard, too harsh. Instead, we'll say that the appropriate penalty should have been a 30-day suspension. So the case is 3 years old. So what happens? The employee gets 3 years back pay minus that 30-day suspension. It's an extremely costly proposition when the Civil Service Commission reverses management's decision. If the employee is not satisfied with the Civil Service Commission, he may then ask for judicial review before the Superior Court. And he has another crack at the ball, another bite of the apple. And if he prevails, the employer may or may not take an appeal to the Supreme Court. The employee has the ability to take his case to the Supreme Court. So it's not exactly as though there's a lack of due process and the application of just procedures in this termination process. In fact, it's the opposite. It's fair to a failing. It's so slanted towards the employee that oftentimes employees are put back on the job with back pay that shouldn't be. So that's the situation as it exists. So if that's the situation, what would cause management to say, we're going to look at all 13 of these adverse actions and we're going to appoint Connie Joe to do a task force to determine whether justice was done? And then come up with this board meeting where we've decided we're going to settle. Well, what is the public perception in a situation like that? If the case goes through to a final result, the public perception is generally, well, that's the way it works. That's the system. Usually the system is right. I would rather depend on that system than leave the employee discipline in the hands of arbitrary and capricious individuals. Well, we now have arbitrary and capricious individuals sitting on the board at the commercial port. When they decided that they would substitute their judgment for the Civil Service Commission, the Superior Court, and the Supreme Court, it does not look good. The optics of it are very bad. Oftentimes in our society, we say that we are happy that we are a government of laws and not a government of men. In other words, before the law, it doesn't make any difference who's your buddy, who you supported in the last gubernatorial election, who your mother is, etc. That's the way it's supposed to work in a government of laws, not a government of men. But the board at the commercial port has now turned the disciplinary process at the port into a government of men. If the board likes you, maybe the board doesn't like you, but if the board decides you don't have, you can say, I don't need no stinking civil service commission. I got my job back. The board gave it back to me. So former director, Manager Brown says, this is just political payoff. I don't know if it's political payoff, but it sure looks like it. It sure doesn't look like a devotion to due process and properly applied organs of justice. Then there's something else that's very troubling here, and that is the last line of this story. Respicio told the Guam Daily Post, I won't comment on any of the remaining Port 7 cases which are pending before the Civil Service Commission because, are you ready for this, Real Joe Cruz?
I'm ready, sir.
I will not comment on any of the remaining Port 7 cases which are pending before the Civil Service Commission because I recused myself. Rory recused himself. In other words, Rory said, I'm removing myself from a decision-making role here. Now, he doesn't tell us why he recused himself. So once again, we have nothing, we can do nothing but speculate. Did he recuse himself because he's been interfering with the process? Did he recuse himself because he is unbiased? Did he recuse himself because he's not unbiased? Does he recuse himself because he has foreknowledge of the whole controversy? A very, very interesting question. So interesting that yesterday I sent off a sunshine law request to Rory asking him to send me all of the public records that reflect his recusal. I want to know why he recused himself. Because he was afraid that he couldn't deal with the matter in a fair and just manner? Or because he was afraid that there was an appearance of impropriety, that people might think that he couldn't deal with it in a fair and just manner? Directors recusing themselves from the disciplinary process, I don't think has ever happened before. I've been watching this stuff for a long, long time, and I don't ever remember it happening before. So, you know, when this case first came on the card, it was titled "The Settler versus Connie Joe Shinohara." You remember what the definition of settler was in that situation, don't you, Real Joe Cruz?
I do, sir.
It wasn't someone who'd moved here from the mainland, was it?
No, it's someone who seems to settle all the time when it comes to...
Yeah. He wanted to settle the YTK case. He apparently wanted to settle the Port 7 cases. He wanted to settle Mike Phillips somewhere outside of his position as counsel for the port. So are we seeing the settler in action? And if we are, then I guess the focus of new activity would be what else is there at the port that could be settled short of a final result. I notice you've opened up the Jimmy line. Yes, okay, sir. Jimmy, tell us about Rory.
Oh, I got one comment about Rory, and I got some Gov-Guam jokes.
Well, I'll entertain the comment about Rory. I don't know about the Gov-Guam jokes, but go ahead, Jimmy.
Anyway, Rory's pretty smart. Okay, he couldn't get elected when he ran for public office. You know, he got kicked out of the legislature, lost his $55,000 a year job.
And he was part of the Port 7, so he set an $80,000 job for a while. But go on, Jimmy.
And then he got another job, appointed, a political throw the dog a bone. And what's he making, like $100,000 a year?
I think like around $170,000, yeah.
Yeah, so he's not a dumb guy.
No, dumb like a fox, maybe, huh, Jimmy?
Yeah, dumb like a fox. Hey, how many GovGuam employees does it take to change a light bulb?
4, Jimmy. 1 to hold the light bulb and 3 to turn the ladder.
Well, that's personnel matter. I can't take.
Very good, Jimmy. Very good.
How many GovGuam's employees does it take to answer a telephone call?
I give up, Jimmy.
I don't know, but more than we got now.
You're on a roll today, Jimmy. You got any more? These are good.
How many GovGuam employees could pass a drug test if it was given today?
Don't know, Jimmy.
Every damn one of them, because my cousin is the official drug tester for GovGuam.
Okay.
And that's it. I'll hang up and stop bothering you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Jimmy. Jimmy always spreads a little sunshine wherever he goes, doesn't he, real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir, he does.
Yeah. Okay, then the next thing I've got here on the calendar is the Daily News versus the claimants. And this is a case of a Daily News just writing a really, really bad story. And the title of the story is, and this came out, I think, yesterday, GovGuam needs consent from living survivors to pay war claims. Well, living survivors is kind of a troublesome phrase anyhow, isn't it? You know, survivor kind of means you're still alive. You survived, right? How many dead survivors were there after the plane crashed? None. And then the story says, war survivors who want to avail of the Local War Claims Act will need to allow the government of Guam to pay their adjudicated claims. Really? Bill 181, the Local War Claims Bill, was passed by the legislature and is expected to be signed by the governor. The bill allows for the payment of living survivors that have adjudicated claims. Speaker Tina Munya Barnes, she was the one that was nearly crying. Office said war survivors will need to sign a consent form to allow the local government to know the status of their claims and the amount owed. The government of Guam would need to get the names and the adjudicated amount to pay the war survivor. The government needs to know who the survivors are if they're consenting to sign their claims to GovGuam and if they are still alive. That's a pretty tough test. According to the Speaker's office, the local government is looking at paying about 750 claimants who meet the requirement for the Local War Claims Act. Now, there's a Local War Claims Act, apparently. I didn't know that. Should there be more than 750 living survivors with adjudicated claims, Barnes has been assured by Governor Leon Guerrero that the funds will be made available to fulfill all payments. There are about 1,500 fully adjudicated claims approved by the Foreign Claims Settlement Commission. According to federal law, the surviving spouse or children of a Guam resident who died during the Japanese occupation of Guam, or as Guam was being liberated, can claim up to $25,000. All right, let me read that again. The surviving spouse or children of a Guam resident who died during the Japanese occupation or during the liberation can claim up to $25,000. Other war survivors or their heirs can claim $10,000 or $15,000. No! Heirs don't get to claim anything. We've been through this so many times on the air. A-I-R, not H-E-I-R. That in order for a person to be eligible for this war claims money, they had to be alive on the day this law was signed by the President of the United States. So if you took a situation where someone who went through the Japanese occupation and died in 1980, that's it. What does his surviving spouse get? Tadza. What do his surviving children get? Tadza. So this article is just dead wrong. People read these things and they think, oh boy, I'm going to get a check because, you know, my uncle died a year ago and he went through the occupation. And then it gets even worse. The $15,000 is for war service survivors who suffered rape or severe personal injury, such as loss of limb, etc. Then on the next page, the fully adjudicated claims by the Federal Commission include heirs of war survivors. No. But then it says, which are not eligible under the local war claims bill. Well, first of all, there is no local war claims bill. And second, this is so wrong. You know, this is if this were an editorial, it would be an F-. In fact, I'm going to give an F-, even though it's not an editorial. So I don't know how they can do this on something that has been around for so long and has been stated so often, even in the daily news. So that's enough on this particular story. If you want further clarification, don't read the daily news. Call me, and I'll tell you what the statute actually says. So I'm going to grade this story. Here it is, F-, and I probably should think a little bit, see if there's a lower grade that I can give the Daily News for that horribly written story. Okay, next on the card, I have Underwood versus San Nicolas. San Nicolas has got a great imagination. San Nicolas wants territories represented in the Senate, too, calling it a common sense next step in the pursuit of territorial justice. Congressman Mike San Nicolas introduced a measure that seeks to expand territorial representation in the United States Congress by establishing a non-voting representative to the U.S. Senate for each territory. Wonderful idea. We have a representative in the House of Representatives. Shouldn't we have one in the Senate, too? Yeah. H.R. 5526 provides for non-voting delegates to the Senate to represent American Samoa, the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. With no membership in the Senate, the delegate said territories are underrepresented in Congress. This sounds like a Ken Joe-Ada, doesn't it? When you have you know that you are underrepresented in the Senate because you have no representation. Ken Joe-Ada. Because the overall Congress is a bicameral body that includes both the House and the Senate. I never knew. Did you know that, Real Joe Cruz?
I had no idea.
What a revelation. The Congress has two houses, a House and a Senate. Every federal law passed requires the involvement of both the House and the Senate. Now, I don't think they're as modern as we are. They probably haven't given any thought to setting up a prayer room instead of meeting in the Senate chamber, just going off in the prayer room and praying for a good result, trusting the president. Every federal law requires the involvement of both the House and the Senate, and the territories are only involved in half the process. San Nicolas said, whenever there are differences between House and Senate versions of legislation, the need for representation in both is critical to ensure that all perspectives are considered. And I expect that everybody in the Senate says that whenever there has to be a Senate-House conference to iron out differences in the bill. I expect every one of the senators says, wow, I don't know that we're going to have all perspectives here. We don't have a senator from the territories in this conference. Another bill by San Nicolas, H.R. 1365, to authorize federal payments of war claims is under Senate consideration and has already passed the House. San Nicolas says the Senate will likely approve it soon, but the lack of Senate representation is still felt. If we had a U.S. senator, we could have a mirror version of H.R. 1365 through the House at the same time, helping the process move even faster. He said, additionally, certain amendments like those in the National Defense Authorization Act, which originated in the Senate, could have been more thoroughly explained if there was actual Senate representation for territories. Okay, let's break for the seventh inning stretch, and I've got Robert Underwood standing by in the center field bleachers at Wrigley Field. So right after the seventh inning stretch, we'll hear from Robert Underwood.
Ever notice how that one perfect holiday gift is just out of reach? Or how sales on the stuff you want all come at the same time? This season, plan ahead with a holiday loan from First Hawaiian Bank. Now you can afford to be nice without being naughty. For more details, visit FHB.com or any branch to apply. Additional restrictions apply. First Hawaiian Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
Brain health is vitally important, but it's not something we focus on. I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll explore more ways we can keep our brain in optimal condition.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mescla. Try their featured special for December. Seafood Lao Lao, a medley of salmon, shrimp, scallops, and fresh spinach, wrapped in tea leaves, steamed to order, topped with soy butter sauce and your choice of starch. Visit Mescla in Agotnia and now in Tumon at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For reservations, please call 969-2652.
So, seventh inning stretch. So here we are out in the center field bleachers at Wrigley Field, and I'm going to entertain the comments on former Congressman Robert Underwood on the San Nicolas initiative for Guam to have a non-voting member of the Senate of the United States. Former Congressman Robert Underwood reacted to the legislation, calling it a, quote, long shot effort. Long shot. Yeah, this is not a three-pointer. You know, if we were to give points based on how far away, you know, a three-pointer would be behind the three-point line. From center court, it'd be about a 6-pointer. From the free throw line at the other end of the court, it'd be about a 15-pointer. That would be a long shot, right? Well, what San Nicolas has here is about a 47-point shot, if he can make it. He's standing outside of the arena, the basketball arena, out in the parking lot somewhere, just hoping that a janitor will open the window at the right time so when he fires the ball up there, it'll take this incredibly long arc and go in the basket. That's a really long shot. Underwood explained that historically this was discussed when resident commissioners were created for the Philippines in the early 1900s. He said it was decided to put them in the House rather than the Senate, instead of creating another excuse as to why H.R. 1365 didn't pass the Senate as he promised, the delegate should explain what happened, Underwood said. Perhaps there's another correction needed to this correction bill. I hope I read that correctly. The bill was hotlined and poised to be on the Senate floor, but something happened. Now, could it have been that Rory went to went to the Senate and entered into some kind of a settlement agreement? Is that? No, I don't think so. Perhaps there is another correction needed to this correction bill. The bill was hotlined and poised to be on the Senate floor, but something happened. What happened is more important right now than finding another reason why it's hard to pass legislation in Congress. So, Michael, tell us what happened. Hey, what happened? Okay, so going back to Michael's really neat idea. Well, that'd make a nice movie, wouldn't it? Michael's really neat title for a movie. If we're going to ask to have a non-voting delegate in the Senate, maybe we should also ask for a non-voting member in the British House of Lords. Or how about the College of Cardinals at the Vatican? The UN Security Council? Maybe you can give me some other suggestions. The chances of this happening, yeah, it just isn't within the realm of possibility. And if it were, then, Michael, you wouldn't start by introducing a bill in the House that would have an impact on the Senate. Wouldn't you think the way to do it would be to find a senator who's amenable to your idea and have that senator introduce the bill in the Senate? So I think you'd have a hard time finding anybody in the House of Representatives who would rise to the challenge of telling the other House how to conduct its business. There's a concept of comedy where everybody kind of stays in his own lane. Now, that doesn't work for Tina Rose, Munya Barnes, and Lou when it comes to war claims. But as a general principle, that's how it works. You know, the courts don't usually legislate. The legislature doesn't act like a court, except in impeachment, and so on. So if it were a good idea, then perhaps a senator would snap it up and introduce it for you. Now, I was really curious as to what the bill said, so I went online to read it. It's not online. I went to every place that it ought to be, including St. Nicholas's website, and it's not there. But this is what I found on a website that describes the bill, and this is what it said. H.R. 5526, to provide for a non-voting delegate to the Senate to represent American Samoa, the CNMI, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. Let me read that first part again. To provide a non-voting delegate to the Senate. So the way I read this sentence, there would be one delegate who represents American Samoa, the CNMI, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. If that's the case, even if it went somewhere, you know, we're still swallowed up. And there's something else that I've always wanted to comment on here when it comes to territorial relations. Apparently, our representative and some of the others think that by lumping all of the territories together, there's added strength. Well, all of the territories are working together on this, and they're adding all of the clout that each of them possesses to this measure. And therefore, when we go forward with it, nobody pays any attention to it because territories don't have any clout. So in our case, the literal and figurative elephant in the room is Puerto Rico. We have so little in common with Puerto Rico. One thing we have in common with Puerto Rico is that we're both islands. That is that there's salt water all around each of us. But Puerto Rico has over 3 million people. It has had and has a vibrant agricultural industry. It has a lot of things. If it were a state, it would be sort of like the 26th most populous state and would have 4 members of the House of Representatives. It's so much bigger than we are. It's not even close. Now, the other territories, yeah, Samoa, Northern Marianas, Virgin Islands, yeah, we have something in common. In fact, we are the 800-pound elephant there because we're the biggest, most prosperous, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we're held back by lumping ourselves with Puerto Rico, because if we were able to make a case, and I can think of ways that we could make a case that the other ones couldn't. We are, as a matter of fact, the only one of the territories that was ever occupied by a foreign force. We're the only one of the territories where the United States, when the war clouds gathered, pulled out and left the population behind. We're the only territory that had to deal with a security clearance for the first 12 years of its existence that held that no one could come to the island without the permission of the U.S. Navy. So we have some selling points that we could use that the other ones don't have. So if we were to advance our own case, we wouldn't have members of the Congress saying, "Oh, if we give it to those guys, if we give it to Puerto Rico, they're so big. 4 members of the House, they're probably all going to be Democrats. I ain't going to do it." So tactically, is it wise for us to join forces with the other territories? Yeah, I know the conventional, the common sense answer. You know what I think about, well, your common sense tells you that if we work together, we're going to get farther than if we work by ourselves. I don't think so. I'd like to see my representative in Washington represent me in the island of Guam. I don't want them representing Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands and Samoa. Anyhow, wonderful idea, Michael. I think the real salvation for you is for the Senate to pass that bill and to moot out the silliness that Tina and Lou have been engaged in, the one that almost brought Tina to tears. Now, you could maybe get an acting coach to help you work on your facial expressions when you make your next announcement about the War Claims Bill, so that you could be apparently almost on the verge of tears, Michael. Good acting coach could help you do that. I don't know who Tina's coach is, but anyhow. So that's Michael San Nicolas versus Underwood versus San Nicolas. Next, I've got AWA versus God's and Arrow. AWA stands for the Animal Wellness Foundation, or the Animal Wellness Action. It doesn't mean, it's not the Spanish word for water, AWA. So there's the Animal Wellness Foundation and the Animal Wellness Action. And these guys are not horsing around. There's a story in the Post. We already know that they run full-page ads in both the newspapers, that they've had a man on the ground out here, that they've been conducting their own public relations, that they've conducted a poll that pretty much puts the old idea that cockfighting is a popular part of the culture. Put that in the GI can. We know that. We know that they're offering $2,500 rewards for anyone who gives law enforcement a tip that leads to the conviction of an animal abuser. We know all of those things. And the latest shoe to drop is that they're going to have investigators on the ground on Guam to document illegal cockfighting. So imagine that. A cockfight cops. So imagine yourself at a cockfight, say in Talafofo, and you're out in the boonies and you're watching them. It's one of those drizzly, rainy nights, and all of a sudden a stranger shows up wearing a trench coat and carrying a notebook. And he starts looking around and writing names down, taking notes, and he has a very small camera that you probably wouldn't notice unless you're looking for it. He seems to be taking a lot of pictures. Who is that guy? Do you know him? I've never seen him before. He's Chamorro Dalto, no? No, I've never. He's not Chamorro. I don't know where he's from. I wonder what he's doing at the cockfight. He's an investigator, and he's investigating illegal cockfights. Yeah. And I think that perhaps the thing that are some folks here on the island have overlooked, that when it comes to animal rights, there is an extremely strong brand of Kool-Aid that these animal rights folks drink. And I gave you a little taste of what that Kool-Aid is like in Missouri versus California, where California won't let you sell eggs that were laid by chickens that couldn't stand up, lay down, pirouette. Yeah. And that's a product of this whole animal rights thing, that the animal rights folks get so deeply into this that it's a quasi-religion for them to protect all animals. You heard our Carl talk about a poll or a petition that he'd seen online where some animal rights group was collecting signatures opposing the use of mice for lab experiments. And Dr. Tom Poole, the territorial veterinarian, alluded to having had some really hot confrontations with the PETA folks when he was it Montgomery, Alabama? I can't remember. PETA stands for People for Ethical Treatment of Animals. Yeah. Ethical treatment of animals. So, one of those guys, a card-carrying PETA member, would just see me walking down the street, and they'd say, "Come over here, you. You are abusing animals." What do you mean I'm abusing animals? We got a couple dogs, and we love our dogs. We're very kind to our dogs. I would never, ever do anything to those dogs except pet them. Why do you say I'm cruel to animals? What's that you've got around your waist? A belt? Isn't that belt made out of leather? Well, yeah, it is. Take it off and throw it in the trash. You're being unkind to animals. No leather belts. No leather shoes. No eating meat. No using animals for your own purpose. Animals have rights, too. How dare you parade around? Are you showing that belt off just because it's made on that's I'm exaggerating a little bit. After all, the name of the show is Tall Tales. But that's the kind of mindset that you're dealing with here with these animal rights folks. So when this animal rights dude comes out here and, listens to people talk, the fact that someone comes forward and says, well, it's part of the culture, it's not going to have any impact on him. When you hear someone like me saying criminal laws should be made at the state level, in our case at the territorial level, let us decide what cruelty to animal is. Don't do that back in Washington, D.C. He's going to say, we will go wherever we have to go to make sure that animals are not treated cruelly. If we have to go to the United Nations, we'll go to the United Nations. So that's the depth of the mindset that we're dealing with here. So if I could give some advice to the gods and arrows out there, it would be take this stuff seriously, because it could be a real problem for you. Okay, so we're coming up to the home stretch here.
A diamond ring turns into a black pearl and hangs shimmering in the sky.
Join 93.3 The Point for a spectacular celestial event. On the evening of December 26th, a rare solar eclipse will take place just before sunset.
We see the sun's atmosphere, normally not visible.
Most of the sun will be blocked during the eclipse, leaving only a ring of fire visible, and we have the best seats and the safest way to watch it.
It's one of the great wonders of the solar system.
Join us at the Point Coffee Lounge at the Sheraton Laguna Guam Resort from 4 to 6 p.m. on December 26th. The first 100 guests will receive a pair of Eclipse viewing glasses, a complimentary glass of iced tea, and a coupon good for discounts at Sheraton's Surfers Point Bar or La Cascada Buffet Restaurant. Join us for the Point's 2019 Eclipse Viewing Party, December 26th from 4 to 6 p.m. at the beautiful Sheraton Laguna Guam Resort. Brought to you in part by Sheraton Laguna Guam Resort, Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, and your sky-watching friends at 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Call to the post, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, the home stretch. That means I got about 8 more minutes to wrap this up. And I think to wrap today's show up, and before I get too deeply into things here and run the risk of forgetting, Margaret Bloss, our listener in Cypress, California, has gone online and wished me and members of my family and the Tall Tales team a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year from her family here in Cypress, California, Arizona, and Hawaii. Well, thank you, Margaret, and we really appreciate your dedication. It's kind of late in Cypress, California to be listening to Tall Tales, but of course it's worth it to be staying up this late. So Merry Christmas to you also. Okay, Tello versus Tello. There's some really interesting quotes here. In a press release, and this goes to 2 bills, 181-35, that's the war claim bill, and then the FESPAC bill. So I'm going to start with the war claims bill and see how far I can get with that. Starting out with Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes, who was almost in tears when in that other article. In a press release, Tina Munya Barnes said the governor has given her assurances that the bill, once routed to Adelup, will be signed into law, and they would expeditiously begin working with the Trump administration to sign the memorandum of understanding so that we can begin the process to pay our survivors what is due to them. And my addition here, and we hope that this happens before St. Nicholas's bill becomes law. Otherwise, it would steal our thunder. Then Tina goes on to say this: after being misled by false promises. Now, who made the false promises? Was that you, Real Joe Cruz?
No, sir.
Did you ever hear me make a false promise?
No, sir.
Do you think I'm even capable of making a false
I
promise?
seriously doubt that, sir.
Yeah. Well, I promise you this. I'll never make a false promise.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. After being misled by false promises, after months of delay, I am blessed to be part of a dynamic body of legislators that is finally able to fulfill our commitments to our greatest generation. Did you hear it? Did you hear? See, Madame Ko, did you hear that? When asked who misled them, Barnes communication director Chirag Bhawani responded, Since August, we were asked to wait just a month. Then Thanksgiving, and then before the recess in December, and today, by the end of January. And that's a non-answer to the question, isn't it? Promise. Saying something does not, in order for words to constitute a promise, there has to be some sort of a commitment. As an example, next Friday is payday, Real Joe Cruz. Now, if for some reason you don't get paid next Friday, have I broken my promise?
No, sir.
No, I didn't say, I will see to it that you get paid, right? So St. Nicholas is trying to keep the folks up to date on what's going on. I don't recall that he made any promises. The only promises that I remember were Tina and the governor saying, we want to get this payments out to the old folks before Liberation Day. Maybe they didn't exactly promise it, but that was certainly the implication. That's why they were in such a hurry. Bawani noted that the amount is still unclear as local government officials are still waiting on a list of survivors who have been adjudicated to date. How are they going to get that list? And the answer is, who has the list? And that's the Claims Commission at the Department of, it's the Claims Commission, wherever they are. You think that if I sent a note saying, could you give me a list of the claimants and the amounts, you think they'd send it to me? I don't think so. The funding source is fiscal year 19 lapses and fiscal year 20 budget, subject to the governor's transfer authority, Bawani noted, to questions regarding the funding source of the bill. The Speaker has requested that the governor expeditiously work with the U.S. Treasury to sign the MOU so claimants can begin signing over their claims to the government of Guam. That's a frightening thought. As far as how the claims would be processed, Bawani said, just like our office checks with the Foreign Claims Settlement Commission on the status of our constituents' claims, they need to sign a consent form. Once we get a signed consent form, we are then able to get the status of their claims and the amount. This process would need to take place so Gov Guam can, and the reporter lets him go. The reporter asks a question, and Bawani comes back and talks and doesn't answer the question, and the reporter lets it go. As to how the claims would be processed, Bawani said, just like our office checks with the Foreign Claims Commission on the status of our constituents' claims, they need to sign a consent form. Once we get a signed consent form, we are able to get the status of their claims. This same process would need to take place so Gov Guam can get the names and the adjudicated amount. Doesn't answer the question. And then St. Nicholas rebuts. I never said to wait a month or until Thanksgiving or until the December recess. In fact, I never gave any specific timelines until my recent pronouncement that we anticipate passage in January, barring any adverse local impact. What I have maintained is that passing Bill 181 risks 1365, and had we done so back in August, we may not be looking at a likely passage in January. Okay, so I didn't get to the tello versus tello part. I guess I'll come back to this tomorrow. Tello versus tello.